The rain was falling hard when Kang Dae-Hyun collapsed against the pillar. Blood soaked through his white shirt, his vision blurred, and the cold concrete pressed into his back. He expected sirens. He expected bullets. But instead, he heard a small voice cutting through the rain. "Mister, are you okay?" He looked up. A little girl stood before him holding a rainbow umbrella, her pink dress already damp, her sneakers worn at the toes. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She should have been running away. Everyone else did. Dae-Hyun tried to wave her off. "Go home, kid." But she didn't move. Instead, she stepped closer and held the umbrella over his head, shielding him from the rain. The colors, red, yellow, green, blue, glowed under the streetlight like a small sun in the darkness. "You're all wet," she said softly. "And you look sad. Did you lose your house?" Dae-Hyun stared at her. In 20 years of running the most feared organization in Seoul, no one had ever looked at him with concern. Fear, yes. Respect always. But never this, never kindness from a stranger who had nothing to gain. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out half of a granola bar, the wrapper crinkled and worn. "Here. Mommy says we should share when people are hungry." Dae-Hyun felt something crack inside his chest. Children crossed the street when they saw him coming. Dae-Hyun stared at the granola bar in her small hand. The wrapper was torn at the corner, and he could see where her tiny fingers had carefully broken it in half. One piece for her. One piece for a bleeding stranger in an alley. "Take it," she insisted, pushing it closer. "You need it more than me." He wanted to refuse. He just orchestrated a deal worth millions. He owned restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people earned in a week. But something in her earnest expression made him reach out with a trembling hand and accept it. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rougher than he intended. She smiled then, and it was like watching clouds part. "You're welcome, mister. What's your name?" "Dae-Hyun," he paused. "What's yours?" "Harmony." She adjusted the umbrella, making sure it covered him completely even as the rain began soaking her shoulder. "That's a good name, right? Mommy says it means when things fit together nice." He nodded slowly, tasting copper in his mouth. Harmony. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a man who built his empire on fear and violence, being comforted by a child named Harmony. "You should go home now," he said, gentler this time. "Your mother will worry." "Not yet." Harmony sat down beside him on the wet concrete, still holding the umbrella over both of them. "You can't stay here alone. What if you get sicker?" "I'll be fine." "That's what grown-ups always say." She wrinkled her nose. "But you don't look fine. You look like when Mommy came home from her 2 shifts and fell asleep standing up." Dae-Hyun closed his eyes. Every breath sent sharp pain through his ribs. His phone was shattered somewhere in the gutter. His men thought he was dead. And here he was, being protected by a 6-year-old with a rainbow umbrella and half a granola bar. "Harmony, do you have somewhere to go?" she interrupted, studying his face with unsettling intensity. A real somewhere, not just "I'll figure it out somewhere." He thought of his penthouse across the city, his safe houses, his empire built on shadows and secrets. All of it suddenly felt very far away. "Not tonight," he admitted. She nodded as if this confirmed something she already knew. "Then I'm staying until you do. Mommy says we don't leave people when they need help, even if they're strangers, especially if they're strangers." The rain drummed against the umbrella above them, a steady rhythm in the darkness. Dae-Hyun looked at this child who should have been afraid of him, who should have run screaming. Instead, she sat beside him in a dirty alley, sharing her umbrella and her food, refusing to abandon him. For the first time in 20 years, Kang Dae-Hyun didn't know what to. "Harmony Elizabeth Williams." The voice cut through the rain like a whip crack. Dae-Hyun's eyes snapped open to see a woman running toward them, her waitress apron still tied around her waist, her dark hair plastered to her face by the downpour. Harmony jumped up, "Mommy, I found. Get away from him, now." The woman Naomi, he assumed, pulled her daughter behind her with one hand while the other clutched something in her pocket. Pepper spray, probably, or a kitchen knife. Dae-Hyun raised his hand slowly, wincing at the movement. "I didn't." "I can see what you didn't do." Naomi's eyes traveled from his blood-stained shirt to the wound visible through the torn fabric. Her voice shook, but she didn't back away. "Harmony, go inside. Wait by Mrs. Chen's door." "But Mommy, he's hurt." "Inside now." Harmony's lower lip trembled, but she obeyed, casting one worried glance back at Dae-Hyun before disappearing around the corner with her rainbow umbrella trailing behind her. Naomi waited until her daughter was gone before kneeling down to his level. Up close, Dae-Hyun could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her hands trembled even as she tried to appear strong. "Are you running from someone?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "Well, they come here looking for you. They think I'm dead." She studied him for a long moment, and Dae-Hyun found himself unable to look away. There was something in her gaze that reminded him of his own mother, decades ago, before the world taught him that mercy was weakness. "My daughter has a soft heart," Naomi said finally. "She brings home stray cats, feeds birds with broken wings. I've told her 1,000 times that not everyone deserves help, but she never listens." She paused. "I should call the police, or an ambulance, or just walk away and pretend I never saw you." "You should," Dae-Hyun agreed. "That's what a smart person would do." Naomi stood up, her decision made. "But apparently I raised a daughter who shares granola bars with bleeding strangers, and I can't very well tell her to be kind and then walk away from someone who might die in this alley." She offered him her hand. It was small, calloused from years of hard work and shaking slightly. "I have a first aid kit upstairs. Basic stuff, but better than nothing. You can stay until morning, then you leave and we never see you again. Understood?" Dae-Hyun stared at her hand. He'd ordered men killed for less than hesitating. He built an empire on decisive action, but accepting this woman's help felt more dangerous than any bullet wound. "Why?" he asked. Naomi's expression softened. "Because my daughter is watching from Mrs. Chen's window, and I need her to believe that kindness still matters in this world, even if I'm not sure I believe it myself anymore." She kept her hand extended. After a moment, Dae-Hyun took it. The apartment was smaller than Dae-Hyun's walk-in closet. Naomi helped him onto the worn couch, its floral pattern faded from years of use. The springs creaked under his weight. Harmony hovered nearby, still clutching her rainbow umbrella, watching with wide eyes as her mother retrieved a plastic first aid kit from under the bathroom sink. "Harmony, sweetheart, get some clean towels from the closet," Naomi said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The girl nodded and scurried off, her small footsteps echoing in the quiet apartment. Dae-Hyun looked around while Naomi worked on cutting away his ruined shirt. The walls were bare except for a few crayon drawings taped near the kitchen, stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. There was no television, no decorations. The only furniture was the couch, a small table with two mismatched chairs, and a bookshelf made of cinder blocks and planks. His eyes drifted to the kitchen. Through the open cabinet doors, he could see the shelves, mostly empty except for a box of rice, a jar of peanut butter, and a few cans of soup. "This will sting," Naomi warned, pressing antiseptic to his wound. Dae-Hyun barely flinched. He felt worse. But what made him tense was the view into the refrigerator when Harmony opened it to get ice. A half-gallon of milk, some wilted vegetables, 3 eggs in a carton, nothing else. "Here, Mommy." Harmony returned with 2 thin towels, both patched with careful stitching. "Thank you, baby." Naomi began cleaning the wound with practiced efficiency. "Have you eaten dinner yet?" Harmony shook her head. "I was waiting for you." There's bread and peanut butter. Make yourself a sandwich, okay? What about you? I ate at work. The lie came smoothly, but Dae-Hyun heard it for what it was. He told enough lies to recognize one. Harmony hesitated, then trudged to the kitchen. Dae-Hyun watched her make a sandwich with deliberate care, using just enough peanut butter to cover the bread. She ate standing up, taking small bites, making it last. "You're lucky," Naomi said quietly, wrapping gauze around his ribs. "Another inch and this would have hit something vital." Lucky? Dae-Hyun almost laughed. He ran an organization that controlled half the city's underground economy. He had men who collected protection money from shopkeepers and restaurant owners, men who squeezed struggling families until they had nothing left to give. Families like this one. "When did you eat last?" he asked, his voice low enough that Harmony couldn't hear. Naomi's hands paused for just a second. "That's not your concern." "Yesterday, the day before." "I said it's not your concern." She tied off the bandage with more force than necessary. "There, you'll need to change the dressing tomorrow, but you should be fine for now." Dae-Hyun caught her wrist gently. "Thank you." Naomi pulled away, but not before he saw the tears she was trying to hide. "Just rest, and remember, you leave in the morning." She turned to check on Harmony, and Dae-Hyun leaned back against the couch, staring at the water-stained ceiling. He'd spent 20 years building an empire, and somewhere along the way, he'd become the reason children went hungry. Dae-Hyun woke to the sound of fists pounding on the door. It was just past dawn. Naomi had fallen asleep in the chair across from him, still wearing her waitress uniform, too exhausted to even change. Harmony was curled up on a makeshift bed of blankets in the corner, the rainbow umbrella leaning against the wall beside her. The pounding came again, harder this time. "Williams, open up." Naomi jerked awake, fear flashing across her face. She glanced at Dae-Hyun, then at her daughter, who was starting to stir. "Stay quiet," she whispered to him, then raised her voice. "Just a minute." She smoothed her hair and moved to the door, keeping the chain lock engaged as she opened it a crack. Dae-Hyun couldn't see who was outside, but he could hear them clearly enough. "You're late on your payment, Williams." The voice was rough, casual with practiced cruelty. "Mr. Kang doesn't like it when people are late." Dae-Hyun went very still. "I told you last week," Naomi said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her shoulders. "I don't have it yet. The restaurant cut my hours and—" "Not our problem. You live in this neighborhood, you pay for protection. That's how it works." "Protection from what? You're the only ones who ever threaten us." The sound of a hand slamming against the door made Harmony whimper. Dae-Hyun's jaw clenched. "Watch your mouth," the voice growled. "Mr. Kang has been generous with you people. He could have raised the rates months ago, could have had this whole building cleared out for redevelopment. But he's got a soft spot, see? Lets the working folks stay. All he asks is a little respect and his money on time." "I need 2 more weeks." "You got 3 days, and next time the interest doubles." There was a pause. "Nice door you got here. Be a shame if something happened to it, or that pretty little girl of yours." Naomi's hand tightened on the doorframe. "Don't you dare." 3 days, Williams, or we come back with a different conversation." Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Naomi stood frozen at the door until they faded, then slowly closed it and slid the chain back into place. Her legs seemed to give out, and she sank to the floor, pressing her palms against her eyes. "Mommy," Harmony's small voice cut through the silence. "It's okay, baby. Go back to sleep." Were those the bad men again? "I said it's okay," Naomi's voice cracked. "Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. Dae-Hyun lay perfectly still on the couch, his mind racing. They'd used his name, his organization, his reputation to terrorize a woman who could barely feed her daughter. He'd been gone for less than a week, and already his empire had been corrupted into something unrecognizable. Naomi finally stood up, wiping her eyes quickly before Harmony could see. She glanced at Dae-Hyun and froze when she saw he was awake. Their eyes met across the small room. "You heard," she said quietly. "It wasn't a question." Dae-Hyun nodded once. "Then you understand why you need to leave. The last thing we need is more trouble." She had no idea she just saved the life of the man whose name was being used to destroy hers. And Dae-Hyun intended to keep it that way, at least until he dealt with whoever was corrupting his organization in his absence. Dae-Hyun waited until Naomi left for her morning shift at the restaurant before he moved to the window. Harmony was playing quietly in the corner, drawing pictures with broken crayons on the back of old receipts. She insisted on staying home from school to make sure the mister doesn't get lonely, and Naomi had been too exhausted to argue. The street below was just waking up, vendors setting up fruit stands, an elderly woman sweeping her stoop, and three men in dark jackets leaning against a black sedan, smoking cigarettes and laughing. Dae-Hyun's blood ran cold. He recognized the one in the middle immediately, Park Jin-woo. Dae-Hyun had recruited him 5 years ago, pulled him out of a street gang and given him real work, real money. Jin-woo had been loyal, efficient, and smart enough to know when to follow orders and when to think for himself. Or so Dae-Hyun had thought. Now Jin-woo was standing outside a building full of families who could barely afford rent, collecting protection money from people who had nothing to protect. "Mister," Harmony's voice pulled him back. "Are you okay? You look angry." Dae-Hyun forced his expression to soften. "I'm fine, just thinking." "About what?" "About how sometimes people forget what's important." Harmony tilted her head, considering this with the seriousness only children could muster. "Mommy says that too. She says some people forget that other people have feelings." "Your mother is very wise." "She's the best." Harmony returned to her drawing. "She works really hard so I can have things. Sometimes I hear her crying at night, but she always smiles in the morning." Dae-Hyun's hands curled into fists. He watched Jin-woo and his crew harass an elderly shopkeeper across the street, saw the old man's shoulders slump as he handed over cash he clearly couldn't spare. Jin-woo counted it, laughed, and pocketed the money before moving to the next building. This wasn't about protection. This was extortion, targeting the weakest, the most vulnerable, the people who couldn't fight back. Everything Dae-Hyun had explicitly forbidden when he'd built his organization. He'd always drawn lines. No children, no families scraping by, no preying on the desperate. There were plenty of corrupt corporations and dirty politicians to extract money from, people who played the same game he did and understood the rules. But this was something else entirely. Jin-woo must have assumed Dae-Hyun was dead. The ambush that had put him in this alley had been meant to kill him, after all. And in his absence, Jin-woo had apparently decided to reshape the organization in his own image. "Mister, you're making scary faces again," Harmony said softly. Dae-Hyun turned away from the window. "Sorry, I'm not used to being inside all day. Mommy says you have to rest so you get better. She said if you try to leave before you're ready, you might fall down and hurt yourself worse." "Did she now?" Harmony nodded solemnly. "And she said that even though you're leaving today, she hopes you find somewhere safe to go, because nobody should have to sleep in alleys." The innocence in her voice was like a knife to his chest. This child who had nothing was worried about him, while men using his name terrorized her mother. Dae-Hyun made a decision then, watching Jin-woo disappear around the corner. He wasn't leaving today, not until he'd set things right. That afternoon, while Harmony napped on her pile of blankets, Dae-Hyun borrowed Naomi's ancient cell phone from the kitchen counter. He stepped into the tiny bathroom and closed the door, staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror. The bandages Naomi had wrapped around his ribs were already stained through, and his face was still pale from blood loss. He looked like a ghost. Good, let them think he was dead. He dialed a number from memory, one he'd never written down, never saved anywhere. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Yeah. Tony. Silence, then, boss, holy shit, we thought. I know what you thought. Listen carefully, I don't have much time. Dae-Hyun kept his voice low. Are you alone? Give me 10 seconds. He heard footsteps, a door closing. Okay, I'm in the supply room, boss, what the hell happened? Jinwoo said you were dead, said there was an ambush and… Jinwoo set up the ambush. Another pause, heavier this time. That bastard, I knew something was wrong. Ever since you disappeared, he's been running things like he owns them. Changed protocols, moved money around, started collecting from neighborhoods we never touched. I tried to push back, but… How many are with him? Maybe a dozen. Most of the crew is confused. They don't know who to trust. Some think you really are dead. Others are waiting to see what happens. Dae-Hyun gripped the phone tighter. A dozen traitors. Not a full coup then. Just opportunists who saw a chance to grab power. I need you to do something for me, he said. And you can't tell anyone I'm alive. Not yet. Anything, boss? There's an address. Buildings in rough shape, families barely getting by. I need you to send groceries. Good ones, meat, vegetables, rice, everything. Enough for a month. And arrange for repairs, plumbing, electrical, whatever needs fixing. Use the emergency fund. Tony hesitated. Boss, you hurt your head or something. We're in the middle of a… Do it today, and Tony, one apartment specifically. 3rd floor, end of the hall, make sure there's extra. Clothes for a little girl, school supplies, and he thought of Harmony's worn sneakers. New shoes, pink ones. Okay, I'll handle it, but boss, what about Jinwoo? We need to. I'll deal with Jinwoo. Dae-Hyun's voice went cold. Get me a clean phone, untraceable. Drop it in the alley behind this building tonight at midnight. And tell everyone who's still loyal to wait for my signal. When I come back, I want Jinwoo and everyone who stood with him in one room. You got it, boss. I'm glad you're alive. So am I. Dae-Hyun ended the call and deleted the number from the phone's history. He stared at himself in the mirror again. The prey was about to become the predator, but first he had a debt to repay. A little girl had shared her umbrella with him when he had nothing. The least he could do was make sure she never went hungry again. 3 days later, Dae-Hyun walked through the front door of his headquarters like a man returning from the dead. Because that's exactly what he was. The warehouse on the east side had been his base of operations for a decade. Shipments came and went through the loading docks. Money changed hands in the back offices. And in the center of it all, in a converted break room that now served as a conference space, his organization made the decisions that shaped half the city's underworld. The guard at the entrance went pale when he saw Dae-Hyun. Mr. Kang, but you're… Alive. Dae-Hyun's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Where's Jinwoo? Inside with the others. They're in a meeting. Perfect. Dae-Hyun walked past him, still wearing the bandages Naomi had wrapped around his ribs, now covered by a clean shirt Tony had provided. He'd left before dawn, while Harmony was still sleeping, leaving an envelope of cash under her rainbow umbrella. Not enough to draw attention, just enough to cover what those thugs had demanded and a little more. The warehouse fell silent as he moved through it. Men stopped mid-conversation. Cigarettes fell from slack fingers. Someone dropped a crate of liquor and the crash echoed like a gunshot. He reached the conference room and pushed open the double doors. Jinwoo sat at the head of the table, Dae-Hyun's seat, with 11 men around him. They were counting money, stacks of bills spread across the surface. Small bills, the kind working people carried. Every head turned toward the door. Jinwoo's face went from shock to calculation in less than a second. Boss, we thought. You thought I was dead. Dae-Hyun stepped into the room, and Tony moved from the shadows behind him to close the doors. You thought you could take what I built and turn it into something else, something uglier. Boss, there's been a misunderstanding. Have there been misunderstandings with the families on Maple Street, the ones you've been collecting from in my name? Dae-Hyun's voice was still quiet, but now it had edges. What about Mrs. Chen on the third floor who gave you her late husband's watch because she couldn't make rent? Or the Williams family, a waitress and her 6-year-old daughter living on rice and hope? Jinwoo's jaw tightened. Those neighborhoods needed structure, protection. You were gone and someone had to. I built this organization on rules. Dae-Hyun moved closer and several of the men leaned back instinctively. No children, no families barely surviving, no preying on the desperate. Do you remember those rules, Jinwoo? Times change. The old ways don't work anymore. The old ways kept us alive, kept us from becoming the monsters everyone already thinks we are. Dae-Hyun placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. You used my name to terrorize people who can't fight back, my name to threaten children, my name to become exactly the kind of parasite I've spent 20 years eliminating. What were we supposed to do? Jinwoo shot to his feet. You disappeared. We needed money to keep operations running, and those neighborhoods were easy. Easy? Dae-Hyun straightened. That's your problem, Jinwoo. You wanted easy, but there is no honor in easy, no respect, no legacy worth leaving. Honor? Jinwoo laughed, bitter and sharp. You want to talk about honor? You're a gangster, boss. We're all gangsters here. There is no honor. Then you've forgotten everything I taught you. Dae-Hyun nodded to Tony, who stepped forward with a ledger. Every family you've extorted, every dollar you've taken, it's all documented. He turned to address the room. Anyone who stands with Jinwoo leaves tonight. Pack your things and disappear. Because if I ever see you using my name again, there won't be a conversation. Silence filled the warehouse. Then one by one, the men around the table stood and walked out. Some looked ashamed, others defiant, but they all left. Until only Jinwoo remained. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. No, Dae-Hyun replied. I already made the mistake. I trusted you. Now I'm fixing it. Dae-Hyun smelled the smoke before he saw the flames. He'd been reviewing financial records in his office, redirecting funds back to the families Jinwoo had exploited, when Tony burst through the door. Boss, there's a fire, Maple Street. Dae-Hyun was out of his chair before Tony finished speaking. They took the fastest car, but traffic slowed them down. Every second felt like an hour. Dae-Hyun stared out the window, watching the orange glow grow brighter against the night sky, and felt something cold settle in his chest. Jinwoo, he said. Has to be. Tony gripped the steering wheel harder. He cleared out his apartment this afternoon, took his crew and disappeared. I've got people looking, but... He went after them first, to send a message. Boss, we don't know if... But Dae-Hyun knew. He'd seen it in Jinwoo's eyes during their confrontation. Not just anger, calculation. Jinwoo understood that Dae-Hyun had been staying somewhere in that neighborhood, had some connection to the families there. And if Jinwoo couldn't have the organization, he'd make sure Dae-Hyun paid for taking it back. They arrived to chaos. Fire trucks blocked the street, their sirens wailing. People poured out of the building in various states of undress, coughing, crying, clutching whatever they'd managed to grab. The third floor was engulfed in flames. Dae-Hyun scanned the crowd desperately, looking for a pink dress, a small face. Mr. Kang. He spun. Naomi stood with a group of residents, her face streaked with soot, her waitress uniform torn. But she was alone. Where Harmony? He demanded. Naomi's face crumpled. She went back. Her umbrella, she said she couldn't leave it. I tried to stop her, but she's so fast and the smoke, her voice broke. They won't let me go back in. Dae-Hyun was moving before she finished speaking. Boss, wait, Tony grabbed his arm. The building's not stable. The whole third floor could collapse. Dae-Hyun shook him off. Then I'd better be fast. He pushed past a firefighter shouting warnings and plunged into the building. The heat hit him like a wall. Smoke filled the stairwell, thick and black, making it almost impossible to see. He pulled his shirt over his mouth and climbed, ignoring the pain in his ribs where the bandages had started to tear. Second floor, third floor. The hallway was an inferno. Flames licked up the walls, consuming the cheap wallpaper and exposed wood. The floor groaned beneath his feet. Through the smoke, he could barely make out the doors. Harmony. A cough answered him, small, frightened. He followed the sound to Naomi's apartment. The door was hot to the touch, but not locked. He kicked it open. Harmony was huddled in the corner near the couch, her rainbow umbrella clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her soot-covered face. The room was filled with smoke, and flames were already climbing the far wall. "Mister," her voice was so small, "I couldn't leave it, you gave it back to me." Dae-Hyun crossed the room in 3 strides, scooped her up with one arm and grabbed the umbrella with the other. "Hold on tight." She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his shoulder. The ceiling groaned. Somewhere above them something crashed. Dae-Hyun ran. Down the hallway, through the smoke, past flames that reached for them like hungry hands. The stairs were worse now, partially collapsed. He jumped over a gap, landed hard, kept moving. The heat was suffocating. His lungs screamed, his vision blurred. But he didn't stop. He burst out of the building and into the street, and suddenly there were hands on him, firefighters, Tony, pulling them away from the structure. Behind them, the third floor collapsed with a roar that shook the ground. "Harmony, Harmony." Naomi was there, sobbing, taking her daughter from his arms. Harmony coughed but managed a weak smile. "I got my umbrella, Mommy." Dae-Hyun sank to his knees on the pavement, gasping, his bandages soaked through with blood. He'd saved her, the little girl who'd shared half a granola bar with a dying stranger. And somewhere in the city, Jinwoo had just signed his own death warrant. The hospital kept Dae-Hyun overnight for smoke inhalation and to restitch his wounds. Tony stood guard outside his room while Dae-Hyun made calls, first to his accountants, then to his lawyers, then to the few men in his organization he still trusted completely. By morning, Jinwoo had been found. Dae-Hyun didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. Some betrayals had only one consequence, and Jinwoo had known the price when he lit that match. But revenge, Dae-Hyun was learning, felt emptier than he'd expected. He discharged himself against medical advice and had Tony drive him to a bike shop in the nice part of town. The kind of place where everything gleamed under fluorescent lights and price tags made people wince. "That one," Dae-Hyun said, pointing to a pink bicycle with streamers on the handlebars and a basket on the front, and a helmet to match. The shop owner recognized him. Most people in his line of work did, and didn't ask questions, just rang it up with shaking hands. 2 weeks later, Naomi and Harmony stood in front of their new apartment. It wasn't a palace. Dae-Hyun had learned that too much generosity raised questions, but it was clean, safe, and in a building that actually had working heat. 2 bedrooms instead of 1, a kitchen with a full-sized refrigerator, windows that closed properly. "I don't understand," Naomi said for the 3rd time. "The landlord said it's paid for a year, that there's been some kind of community fund established for displaced families." "The Harmony Fund," Dae-Hyun said quietly. She turned to look at him. He'd been helping her move boxes all morning, staying in the background, trying not to draw attention, but now there was nowhere to hide. "You did this." "A lot of people did this. The neighborhood came together after the fire. It wasn't entirely a lie. He'd made sure of it, anonymous donations, carefully distributed, all legitimate. But yes, I helped." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "Why, you don't owe us anything. If anything, we put you in danger by. Your daughter shared half a granola bar with a stranger who was bleeding in an alley. She gave me her umbrella. Her mother risked everything to save someone she had every reason to fear. Dae-Hyun met her gaze. I owe you more than I could ever repay. Who are you? Naomi asked. Really? Someone who's trying to be better than he was. Before she could press further, Harmony came running out of the apartment building, her eyes wide. Mommy, Mommy, there's a bike on our door, a pink one, with my name on it. Naomi looked at Dae-Hyun. He shrugged. Every kid deserves a bike. Harmony grabbed his hand, tugging. Come see, it's the prettiest thing ever. He let her pull him inside, past mailboxes with freshly painted numbers, upstairs that didn't creak. The bicycle was leaning against their new door, a big bow on the handlebars and a card attached to the basket. Harmony read it aloud, struggling with some of the words. For the girl with the rainbow umbrella, may you always share your light with the world. She looked up at him with those impossibly trusting eyes. Did you write this, mister? I might have. She threw her arms around his legs. Thank you, it's perfect. Over her head, Dae-Hyun met Naomi's eyes again. She was crying now, but smiling too. Thank you, she mouthed. He nodded once. Later, after the boxes were unpacked and Harmony was riding her new bike in circles in the parking lot under her mother's watchful eye, Dae-Hyun stood by his car with Tony. The fund is set up, he asked. Yes, boss. Legitimate nonprofit, proper board of directors, enough capital to run for decades. Education grants, emergency assistance, small business loans for local families. All anonymous, all clean. Good. Dae-Hyun watched Harmony ride past, her laughter carrying on the wind, her rainbow umbrella strapped to the basket. And the building security. Already installed. Cameras, better locks, fire suppression systems. The whole street, actually. Nobody's going to hurt these people again. Make sure of it. Tony hesitated. Boss, the men are asking. After Jinwoo, after everything, what's the plan going forward? Dae-Hyun was quiet for a long moment, watching a 6-year-old girl who'd shown him more humanity than he'd seen in 20 years of running an empire built on fear. New rules, he said finally. Real ones this time. We go after the people who deserve it, the corrupt, the powerful, the ones who play our game and know the stakes. But families like this, children, we protect them now. That's what the name Kang Dae-Hyun means from now on. Some of the crew won't like it. Then they can leave. I'm done building an empire on the backs of people who are just trying to survive. Tony smiled. I was hoping you'd say that, boss. Harmony rode past again, waving. Dae-Hyun waved back. He'd been called many things in his life. The most feared man in Seoul, the Shadow King, the wolf who walked among sheep. But for the rest of his days, he'd remember the night a little girl looked at a bleeding stranger and saw someone worth saving. And he'd spend the rest of his life proving she was right.